today's exhibition was embroidery bringing the world together. And the common thread was examples of the delicate work from all over the world. There were embroideries to cater for most tastes, be they practical, artistic or educational. The proceeds of this exhibition, which is being run in conjunction with a creative embroidery display at the City Hall, will go to the Newcastle Royal Blind Society. Last year the show raised more than $3,500. In Civic Park, crowds were entertained by bands and even intrepid office workers, brave enough to swamp the cafe bar for competition in the annual White Collar Games. It was a chance for the teams of office toilers to show their particular prowess on the sporting field. And their expertise was surprising, despite the events being less than conventional. With the fine spring weather and school holidays continuing, the Tara festivities look like proving to be a hit with both old and the young. The 34 sites have been compiled with the help of local historian Terry Callan. Some of the foreshore landmarks from the early years of Newcastle have been pinpointed exactly, while the whereabouts of others are less accurately located. One in particular is the landing site of Lieutenant John Shortland. It's proposed that a monument wall be built at Camp Shortland as a general reminder of the landing. One of the historical sites earmarked in the display is here at the end of Watt Street, the site of Newcastle's first wharf, the Watt Street Jetty. But historians are having some difficulty in exactly pinpointing the locations of these historical sites because of the amount of reclamation work that's been carried out on the foreshore over the years. For instance, the car park behind me used to be a boat harbour in the early 1800s. And so the council hopes through the display the public may be able to offer some help as to find the exact locations of these historical sites on the foreshore.
The Sydney Storemen and Packers stopped a transfer of fuel to Newcastle late last Thursday night. They're disputing proposed changes in work practices at the Banks Meadow terminal. The Sydney-Newcastle gas pipeline is our major link with the state's refineries. Caltex controls the line and distributes the fuel to other outlets. Company spokesman Barry Pearton says Caltex has 3 days' supply of city-grade super left in Newcastle. He says the last strike by Storemen and Packers left supplies very lean. Oil companies may now have to start trucking supplies north or ship them to the liquid fuels wharf in Newcastle Harbour. At this stage, no date has been set for the dispute to go to arbitration.
Taylor was sent off over this incident in the early minutes of the second round match with South Newcastle. He was duly suspended for 4 competition matches by the league judiciary, but Taylor appealed over that decision. That's where he made his second mistake. If he'd copped it sweet, he would have been able to play in Sunday's semi-final and in the grand final, due to a sloppy wording by the judiciary. The term competition game does not legally include semis, finals or grand finals. The appeals committee, though, covered that earlier error. Lakes United claim that 4 games have been played since Taylor was suspended. But the club has only played 3 games for which the talented representative player was qualified.
7 back.
Earlier this year, the Newcastle and Hunter Museums Association became a chapter member of the Museums Association of Australia. Today, staff and volunteers from local museums and home collectors attended the first conservation training workshop held in the region. It was conducted by Sharon Towns, the Curator of Conservation for the Museums Association. One interesting artefact was this old kerosene-lit bellow system camera, which at one stage was home to a family of rats. This is an intensive workshop here in the Hunter region. Is that because we lack those skills or there's more artefacts?
I think it's an exciting time for the Hunter district, particularly Newcastle, with the large museum happening.
And they're doing it at a ground level, which is great, which means they'll have the skills when the museum is ready to be filled up with objects.
Workshops like this will become a regular part of the museum's calendar and over time should establish a strong local bank of knowledge on restoration and conservation methods to preserve the region's historical artefacts.
Within the district to see.
By this Board of Directors.
At a Board of Directors meeting last night, the Newcastle Rugby League decided their final move in the game of seeing Newcastle play in the Sydney League competition. The Board will now advise the New South Wales Rugby League that unless a decision is soon made regarding Newcastle's future, they'll recommend to the General Committee of the NRL to withdraw their application to enter the competition. According to manager Graham Hart, they've been given a dummy price.
Good try.
Well, we were under the impression that they did want us in there, but it's very evident, I think, now to everybody that they want Brisbane in ahead of us. But we've made the decision. I believe it's the right decision. We've been waiting long enough, and if they don't give us a positive answer on that date, there is no doubt, and I think that the General Committee will approve our recommendation.
Well, why does the Board feel it's so important for Newcastle to enter the Sydney competition?
Well, the reason is it's because what the public want. The public of Newcastle and most other areas where rugby league is played want to see the best players in Australia playing, and that's what's in that Sydney competition. Plus the fact, of course, that we're losing players all the time to the Sydney competition, and we believe that why should we teach them a game of rugby league just to go down and play in Sydney? We'd rather have them up here representing our city.
Taylor was sent off over this head-high tackle in a second-round match with South Newcastle. He appealed before the League Committee and was suspended for 4 competition matches in which his club participated. But it was those words handed down by the Appeals Committee which has backfired and will allow the captain-coach of the Lakes United team to play in the grand final of the Premiership.
Because of the wording of the finding of the Appeals Committee that he be suspended for 4 competition matches in which his club participates, the Board has decided that he is now eligible to play rugby league again.
Will this outcome affect further results of other appeals that may be made?
Well, it's virtually the wording of the way that the decision is handed down. There was a loophole there, and the Lakes United Club have used it. I'm sure that the Newcastle Rugby League will be looking at that closely in future.
Are you going to catch any fish? No. Haven't we get any? Haven't got a prize. Gee, you've got to get a fish to get a prize, you know. I don't.
Age was no limit today as more than 300 people took part in the annual Fishing Fun Day on the harbour. Fishing enthusiasts as young as 2 years of age lined the foreshore from the Fishermen's Co-op to the Tug Wharf in a bid to make that winning catch. The event coincided with Matara, and there were plenty of prizes up for grabs. The person who made the biggest catch was not the only winner though, with prizes also handed out for an unusual fish, the nearest fish to a specified weight, as well as mystery prizes. Appropriately, winners took home fishing equipment and tackle. Early in the day, a local youngster set an impressive standard with this 2¼ kilogram trevally. The overseer for the day was the Newcastle Junior Fishing Association, run by Alan Clark. Many people seem to be having trouble catching more than just a snag, but once again the day was a success that left them reeling. Carrington Slipways is the only freehold shipbuilding yard on the Australian seaboard. In the next few months it will launch its 200th ship after humble beginnings in 1958. The company has grown from building fishing trawlers to designing and building high-technology mine hunters and cost-efficient bulk carriers, such as the recently commissioned Sandra Marie. Managing Director Don Laverick, speaking today to Newcastle businessmen, forecast a 30% improvement in his company's performance. He told the meeting that new technologies were vital for survival. He also called on Australian tradesmen to learn more skills and become more flexible. Mr Laverick says training at tech colleges must keep in step with changes in industry.
I think that there is certainly room for improvement. Some of the things that we're looking for with training of apprentices is block release, as it's known, so that an apprentice can be trained in a shorter period of tech rather than going 1 day a week for all the year. We would like to see that training brought into blocks. We would also like to see much more flexibility developed, as it is in industry, amongst tech teachers.
So you'd like to see the apprentices learn more about a variety of trades and then specialise later in their careers?
This is what's happening in Europe, John. It's very strong, particularly in Holland, which is still going fairly strong in the small shipbuilding field.
This is the incident that resulted in Rip Taylor receiving a 4-match suspension from the Newcastle Rugby League judiciary. That decision seemed to mean the Lakes captain would miss the grand final following their win in the major semi last weekend. But it was the wording of the appeal committee's review that created the loophole exploited by the Lakes club. That said that Taylor missed 4 matches that his club played. He missed 2 before last weekend, and although the Lakes captain has never played in reserve or 3rd grade in his career with the club, the league said that yes, he could have played 3 grades on Sunday. And with that reasoning, they said he had served his suspension. 2 of the league's board members did not support the decision and indicated that Lakes had made fools of the league. But not content with one controversial decision for the night, the board also decided to recommend that an ultimatum be given to its parent body, the New South Wales Rugby League. That was for the General Committee to withdraw its Sydney application unless they receive a positive decision from the New South Wales board by October 3.
Not the Junior League themselves will align these, but the
Local service stations are once again affected by this latest petrol dispute. The Stormont and Packers control the Sydney to Newcastle pipeline, which normally provides the bulk of supplies for this area. Yesterday, Caltex stopped delivering fuel to service stations from its Newcastle depot. Shell began trucking petrol supplies from Parramatta and Kempsey. Today, there's already evidence that local supplies are low. Some station bouses have been bagged up as the tanks run dry. Since the last Stormont and Packers strike, Newcastle's reserve petrol supplies are down. According to service station owners, local motorists are in the hands of the unions involved in the petrol industry. Protest against the Wilderness Act is beginning to rise above the treetops from 4-wheel drive clubs of the region. Access to Barrington Tops and 35 other national parks will be cut off if the Minister for Planning and Environment, Bob Carr, continues to push.
The Forestry Commission is also fighting tooth and nail to maintain the area.
This week, the Hunter Regional 4-Wheel Drive Council, which represents the 9 clubs in the area, met to decide on their next course of action.
We propose to call a public meeting within 3 to 4 weeks to publicise the wilderness proposal to the people. We feel that the people in this area are not aware of what is contained in this proposal.
The four-wheel drive clubs plan to distribute these pamphlets spelling out the facts. They say it's not only vehicles that will be restricted from the areas.
Wilderness Act will affect everyone that goes into national parks. Certain areas of the national park, according to this Act, will be closed to members of the public completely. We don't agree with this. Certain areas will be restricted to bushwalkers only. We feel that they are only a very minority group within the public themselves, and we feel that the national parks are for the people and should be open to the people.
Are you confident that any A cultural walk through history allowed this audience to travel back into the time of harpsichords and jesters. The medieval merriment was performed by the hunter consort of voices and was all part of the Matara celebrations. The recital depicted the music and poetry of the 14th and 15th centuries, a style of harmonious melodies which are still performed today. Local service stations are once again affected by this latest petrol dispute. The Stormont and Packers control the Sydney to Newcastle pipeline, which normally provides the bulk of supplies for this area. Yesterday, Caltex stopped delivering fuel to service stations from its Newcastle depot. Shell began trucking petrol supplies from Parramatta and Kempsey. Today, there's already evidence that local supplies are low. Some station bowsers have been bagged up as the tanks run dry. Since the last Stormont and Packers strike, Newcastle's reserve petrol supplies are down. According to service station owners, local motorists are in the hands of the unions involved in the petrol industry.
We're very vulnerable. If by a switch of a button they can turn us off or turn us on as far as fuel supply goes.
These pain lovers will paddle around 12 hours a day until they reach Sydney's North Bondi Beach on Saturday afternoon. Early leaders were 42-year-old Alan Coates from Noosa Heads and 24-year-old Anthony Vicelli from Sydney's Manly Club. That lead should change several times as the riders cover up to 80 kilometres a day. For competitors like 57-year-old Jim Ballard from the entrance, just finishing the gruelling test will be enough.
Despite the gloomy outlook for a resolution to the dispute, Newcastle motorists have remained blasé about the prospect of a petrol shortage. This has meant that dwindling supplies have gone further than if panic buying had set in. However, Service Station Association Vice President Dennis Smith says that voluntary weekend closures are likely
it's pretty
if
grim.
no settlement is
I believe
reached
Caltex
soon.
and Shell are...
Early shortages were averted when Caltex turned its 20-day supply of unleaded petrol into supergrade by blending a lead additive. But Caltex has now trucked all of its available fuel out of the Newcastle terminal. A company spokesman in Sydney says that most stations are running at about 50% capacity. Unlike many other oil companies, Mobil consigns its fuel to petrol stations, and it's made the conscious decision to put all of the available fuel out into the marketplace. But it's meant that these bulk tanks behind me are empty. Local service station owner Trevor D says this is the first time in 3 years he's been forced to touch emergency stock.
Last Thursday night, at the release what I had there, it's about 17,500 litres. And as of now, that's gone, so I'm just going from day to day at the moment.
How often do you have to use up those sort of emergency stocks?
That would be the first time in 3 years, I'd say, that it's ever happened to me.
And do you think that's the situation for most of the service station owners?
I'd say so, yes. The ones with emergency stock will be like that.
Righto, John? Yes, as we shadows.
Our sort of things are starting to come together. You know, we've got the right side on the paddock, and everyone's playing well. Everyone's really keen, which is, you know, training hard and keen, want to win.
Right. It's a pretty good-looking side, South Newcastle. I mean, the forwards, they're all big fellas like yourself, and I think Cessnock will see you in particular as a danger man. How would you handle that comment?
Oh, well, I don't know. I think we've got all our guys are danger men, Lee. I don't think I'd sort of single myself out. I've got a lot of good players in the side, and you know, if Cessnock, spend any time on me, well, that's good for the other blokes who are, equally as, can handle the
situation. Yeah. What about Cessnock? Do you see any one particular, or maybe a couple of players that have got to be watched more closely?
Yeah, well, at this sort of level, each player is potentially a dangerous player. Probably the two blokes I'd single out would be, or three, David Woodbury in the forwards, who's a very good stepper and good hard player. Johnny Hunter at halfback, very elusive, and Rob Whitaker on the wing, very strong player, someone we're going to really have to watch. We're just quietly confident that we'll win, be there on grand final day.
How did the South Newcastle camp react to Taylor's